Hello, everyone. It is Friday, so it is time for another episode of Future Strong. I am Lindsay Pollock, and today I have the huge honor of Toya Hodge, the head of marketing and partnerships from Cappfinity, taking the place of our friend Nikki Garcia. But I did get to see Nikki because she was here in New York visiting. I got to see Nikki and her colleague Paul Clark. So Nikki, if you're watching, we love you. We hope you had a safe flight back to the UK. And before I welcome Toya, I did want to invite all of you to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know you're watching. For those of us in the United States, it is hopefully the last thing you're doing before taking off on the holiday weekend. But Toya and I spoke before the session, and before we start talking about our usual issues of Gen Z and recruiting, we did want to acknowledge, for those of us in the United States, it has been a really tough week with the news, politics, women's health, and certainly just adding to what has happened over the past weeks and months and years, and especially challenging for HR professionals. So we know that we are all trying to work with so much going on and so many feelings. So we want to honor that and honor you, and just say that we know that it might be a hard time for a lot of people watching. So thank you for carving out the time, and please do introduce yourselves. With that, I do want to go ahead and introduce you to the show. Future Strong talks about Gen Z, recruiting, and all things talent from the employer side and the higher education side. My name is Lindsay Pollock. I am a New York Times bestselling author of 4 books. My latest is Recalculating, Navigate Your Career Through the Changing World of Work. I am a speaker and a proud brand ambassador for Cappfinity, which is why I am especially excited to introduce somebody who is usually behind the scenes and commenting as a viewer of Future Strong. But we are delighted today to have co-host and guest Toya Hodge. And Toya, we usually have talent professionals, so I'm super excited to dig into how you think as a marketer. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, tell us about your background and how you came to your role at Cappfinity. Welcome.
Thank you. It's so funny, and I'm so excited to be on this side of it. But hi, everyone. Warm welcome, and just hello from the Sunshine State. As Lindsay mentioned, I'm head of partnerships and marketing at Cappfinity. And what does that mean? We can get into that a little bit later. But Lindsay asked about my background. And I think the best way to sum that up is that, I have traditional, 15, 16 years of corporate marketing experience, as well as mentorship and advisement for NGOs, nonprofits. So it's a sort of the best of both worlds in traditional marketing. That's my day job. And then my passion, the things where I get to use my strengths are usually in advisement and mentorship. So that's sort of my background. And that's what actually brought me to Cappfinity. In addition to the interesting tech and the sort of the thinking behind it, the behavioral science component of talent acquisition, talent management truly intrigued me. And that's sort of what brought me here. My first introduction to Cappfinity, I wasn't even I had taken one of Cappfinity's, first assessments, believe it or not, the strengths profile. And I was amazed. My words at the time was like, what is this sorcery? I want to know more. I want to understand what I said and what I did during that assessment, how that informed that assessment. And on top of that is that if you could do it for me, the individual, what would that mean for organizations? And, and I mentioned a little bit ago, because so much of my work over the years has been also with nonprofits and NGOs, I wanted to understand what that could look like for them as well. So that's a little bit about me and what brought me to Cappfinity.
Thank you so much. And I want to welcome some of our Future Strong watchers. We've got our friend and colleague, Trudy Steinfeld. Hi, Trudy, in Cambridge,
Hey, Drew.
Massachusetts. Bailey DeBerry, thank you for joining us from North Carolina. Our friend, Fred Burke in Provincetown, Massachusetts. Fred, I will see you in Provincetown soon. Can't wait for my trip. We've got someone watching from the Finger Lakes, beautiful Finger Lakes region of Western New York. So keep those comments coming, and we welcome those of you watching the replay as well. Latoya, I want to turn to some recent research that Cappfinity fielded that has been getting a lot of press attention in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere. It was released in January of this year. Can you tell us about the report about Gen Z talent recruitment and some of the findings from that report?
Yes. The candidate-driven job market report, we put it out in January. But I want to give a little bit of backstory of what got us to the report. Prior to my joining Cappfinity, Nikki, our fearless leader, as well as you, Lindsay, had done a fair amount of research during the pandemic to really look at from talent trends, systems, what programs, what tech was being used prior to, and what talent leaders were using during, and what they were planning for afterwards. So a year and a half to 2 years of quantitative and qualitative research. And what we wanted to do is, because right around November of last year, we realized that there was a new trend happening, and it was conversations around mass, talent leaving jobs, and you started hearing these Great Recession or Great Resignation. And what we wanted to do is sort of, add additional context, build on what we had learned about, just talent and management and acquisition development during the pandemic, and then what we could learn as we went forward. And on top of that, we wanted to really get closer to what talent in America were experiencing at the time. So that was the impetus for the research that we did with YouGov. And we really wanted to make sure that we got in and asked the questions so we could get a really good readout on Gen Z and millennials. And boy, did we get a readout. So, and every day as the news and trends have moved on since, we put out the report in January, we're finding more and more of what we found in the report in some of the day-to-day trends.
So Latoya, I lost you for a second there. I wanted to ask a question. One of the findings I wanted you to dive in deeper on, an insight was you asked Gen Zs and millennials, how important is it for you to understand a company's culture before you're willing to accept a job to join the organization? Over 80% said it was important. Can you talk about that finding? I think that's really valuable.
Oh, absolutely. When we got the raw data back and we were discussing this internally and really trying to get meaning out of the numbers, that data point really was pretty shocking in a way. Because what we also knew going into the report is that we pulled data points from Pew as well as the Global Economic Forum. So we knew that there were things that were changing around skills development, and that, with the economies, how many early career or, many students, recent graduates, were facing really difficult financial circumstances. And in the midst of all of that, this data point around wanting to understand company culture before they accept an offer really was illuminating, exciting, and it felt like something that we really wanted to make sure we double clicked on throughout our sharing and discussing the insights with our clients. Because what that says to me is what used to work in terms of traditional benefits and some of the things that you would find in terms of company branding prior to the pandemic probably truly had changed. And if you wanted to really get ahead of and secure Gen Z and millennial talent, that throughout your process, you had to really convey what your company culture is. And for what the takeaway we've been telling many of our clients and our partners is that, if you have systems, you have processes in place, that doesn't mean to, throw them out and start afresh. But what it does mean is where there's places for you to really show your people, show what a day in the life of, show what it means to work at that organization, that you need to do that probably much earlier and consistently throughout your talent attraction programs, as well as and probably your development as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the job simulations in Cappfinity's assessment products. It reminds me of the conversation we had a couple episodes ago with Mary Scott, and then our conversation 2 weeks ago on our most recent episode with Latham and Watkins about authenticity and really knowing who you are as an employer so that you can attract the students who are authentically themselves as well. But LaToya, I'm obsessed with the idea that you're the first marketer we've really had on the show, that we mostly have talent professionals. So if you think about Cappfinity clients, you think about employers, what's your advice based on the research findings to them? You talked about show a day in the life a little bit more. I really love to hear it from the way you think as a marketer and a brand expert about how employers can use the data in the report to help them attract the right candidates. What do you think?
I've been waiting for that question my whole life. No, I'm kidding. There's a couple of different ways that you can look at that. From a marketing standpoint, I consider myself sort of a solution provider. And what I'm constantly trying to understand is what are the problems our clients are facing? What can we do to help them? And oftentimes that means making sure I understand my audience, which is our clients, and getting them the information in a way that makes sense for them at the right time. And so for me, when I think about this data, it's a similar sort of marketing, messaging, communication, and also transparency sort of challenge that can be solved. So I think that there's ways throughout your processes where you can really show what you do and connect that piece of information over and over and over to the people that are interviewing for roles within your org. So not super, earth shattering, but it's tried and true things that you can do over and over again.
I like that you said that. It's not earth shattering, it's tried and true. And it, again, it reminds me of the work that Mary Scott shared on our episode, as well as at the recent NACE conference, that sometimes it's the basics, it's the respect, it's getting back to people, it's showing what the job is really about, it's having accurate job descriptions. And welcome Saeed, a New Yorker currently visiting India. We hope you're having a safe trip, who asked for the report. Our fabulous producer, Haley, posted a link to everybody. Cappfinity's report is, of course, available to all, and we just posted that link as well, so you can take a look. LaToya, keeping with the idea of advice based on the findings, we have a lot of career services professionals or other higher ed folks who are looking at these findings from the student side. What would be your takeaways for career services on some of the report findings?
I think one of the first things is to sort of digest it, and then look at what your processes are and what you can do to take it to them. The expectation of a student in this is sort of in this environment of them coming to you is probably not not realistic. So I'm always like, take the information to the student. What can you show? You give them like tangible ways that they can build out their strengths, build out what they can bring to a role. And that can take different shapes. It can be micro internships. It can be, doing personal assessments to really understand, like, okay, this is what my education path is, but what is my career path? And helping them really design that along the way, like helping them understand that, it's points in time, and that it's not, a career isn't like sort of an arrow that you shoot and you get right to the target. It's something that you're building over time. And so I think if you take that to them, if you really help them understand where they are right now, what their strengths are, that will really help them along their path, because that's what it really is, right? It's a path. Where you are at 24 is usually substantially different than where you are in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, and throughout your career.
Yeah, it reminds me of the movement of some campuses to call career services life design or talk about pathing more. I think that really is in line with the trend of kind of that whole student approach as opposed to that very old-fashioned idea of placement, right? And just having a resume drop or a career fair. So I think that is absolutely in line with where the industry is going. We've kind of touched on some of the products and services that Cappfinity offers. Your job is marketing and developing a lot of those products and bringing them out to the end users. You've talked a little bit about strengths profile. I mentioned some of the job simulations. Can you just tell people not just what the products are, but what the value is that they bring to employers and to students? And I love your personal perspective of having such an epiphany in taking the strengths profile. I really felt the same way. That my number one strength was narrator, and I love to do this kind of stuff. So it just confirmed a lot of what I thought. But for students, as you said, they're at a different part of the journey. So can you talk about how Cappfinity thinks about products specifically for that early career professional?
Absolutely. So two things. All of our assessments, job simulations included, they're couched in behavioral science. So what are the behaviors that will support that role? That's the thinking that gets me excited every day, is making sure that you understand what the behaviors are, what the projects, what the opportunities are for success in that role. It really goes from being very generic in like thinking to very specific. And I think it's important because when you find a candidate that's a strong fit for that role, that they're exhibiting behaviors where they will do really well in that role, you're actually also checking your internal mobility and your employee retention box without trying, because you bring that person in, they're using their strengths, they're a good fit for that role. Chances are over time, they'll want to continue to use those strengths and build their careers in your organization. So, and that's important, right, in terms of our product development and our approach, which is a little bit different than the other vendors. But when we looked at the research, some of the insights really screamed, give early career candidates an opportunity to showcase what they could do in that role. That's different than, your traditional academic requirements. That's certainly different than where you went to school. And it's different in a way that's meaningful, because our clients don't have time to continue to lead a continuous cycle of trying to get talent and only for them to leave. What they're really trying to do is offer the best solution to their customers, and they need really strong talent to do that.
Yeah, I'm just glancing at the report of how many, looks like 46% of employers still use GPA to screen candidates. That's almost half. What do you think of that?
I think, when's the last time you thought about your GPA? Lindsay, you're a successful woman. You've used your skills, your strengths in a way to develop a strong, wonderful, career that you're proud of. And when do you ever think about your GPA?
Right.
Never, right? And no one invites you to give a talk and says, hey, but by the way, no, that doesn't happen. But that's the equivalent. And I don't mean to make light of it, but that's
a great point
of what that requirement means. Because as soon as that student or that candidate leaves college, university, that data point doesn't really mean much. So, if there was anything that I would recommend is really look at your requirements for roles, and where you can really look at behaviors or tie behaviors back to that requirement, keep those. But when there isn't a behavior or a tangible way to tie it back to that requirement, maybe go ahead and get rid of it.
Yeah. And that feeling that job descriptions really don't have a lot to do with the job is so frustrating, particularly for candidates who don't have a lot of experience in the workplace. They believe you and what you say in the job posting. I think that's really wise. I'm looking at another insight here, LaToya, just one more for career services, especially. only 20% of respondents reported that they received any interview preparation resources from recruiters, and 19% received post-interview feedback. That feels like a huge opportunity for me. Can you talk about that finding?
I really do think that that is a problem that can be fixed.
Yeah.
So, and in terms of career services, counselors, coaches, that's a place where you can offer that preparation throughout matriculation, right? So it doesn't have to wait until they're a junior or senior. There's ways that you can start to, really help them get comfortable presenting. That's really all an interview is, right? So when they do get into those cycles and they're really looking for internships, apprenticeships, or co-ops, whatever it is, that they're ready, they're confident enough to really communicate what they can bring. So I think that's absolutely a solution that can be fixed. And on the flip side, I know feedback is something that we hear is a concern for many clients. Many of our colleagues struggle with what to share and how to share it. There's concerns around litigation, and all of those things are absolutely important and valid, and not to be minimized at all. But one of the things we do in many of our assessment products is really behavioral science and feedback reports. So they're automated reports based on what the candidate actually did during that process. So it isn't it's the opposite of a generalized statement, or that guy reminds me of myself, which is oftentimes a piece of feedback that you hear. That's why I hired him. It's the opposite of that. So it's tangible, it's automated, and it's what actually happened. So, I think that's a really, that's a value that could be used, and it doesn't necessarily have to require additional time if it's built into your talent attraction stack.
Yeah, we have a comment. I'm sorry, I can't see the name. Great point about additional benefit of using the strengths profile in hiring better sets you up to retain new employees. And I really agree with your point too, LaToya, that if I'm going to interview with a company, so many companies don't even let you know how you did in the process. They completely ghost you. If there's an organization that provides me feedback on how I did, even if I don't get a job there, I've gotten value, right? I might become a net promoter or a refer of talent, or just have a good feeling or apply in the future to that organization. So it seems like a really big opportunity. We love to talk about the future here on Future Strong, obviously. So I want to ask you, as you look to the future, what is keeping you up at night? What's on your mind? What are you thinking about as you look ahead 1 year, 3 years, whatever time horizon you have, when you think about Gen Z recruiting?
I think about Gen Z and millennials all the time. I'm a recovering Gen Xer, and so I am uniquely motivated and inspired by the path that Gen Z and millennials have decided to take, which is very different to generations prior to ours. What keeps me up at night is actually I look for the positive. So there are big traditional systems that are changing. There are traditional practices that are changing. And I want to make sure that we are supporting that. I'll give you an example. Harvard University recently bought a huge package of our assessments, strengths profile assessments, to do a lot of what we talked about just now, and really taking services to the students and really giving them a way to understand at the early parts of their careers what their strengths are and what that career path could look like for that. So that keeps me up in a way that I want to see more of that, more empowerment, more enablement, and helping people get on that path. Because if we do that, then you'll have the right people that are passionate and excited to fix some of our huge problems. And as you said at the beginning of the show, we have a fair amount of those in the US. So wouldn't it be great if we had more of that happening? So that keeps me up, but it's from that sort of optimistic way. How can we help more of that? What also keeps me up is how do I make meaning in terms of my day-to-day as a person that manages a Gen Z talent, and then how do I make meaning out of it in how we work day to day with our clients too. So I think part of what I try to do is like, how do we keep beating the drum? How do we provide those solutions at a time that makes sense for people? So that you don't get so bogged down in how difficult it is, but that you have something that you can do and you can kind of keep pushing forward.
I so appreciate your optimism, which behind the scenes and here on camera is always shining through. So thank you for that positive perspective of the future. I found out Haley tracked it down that Margie Whiteleather made that wonderful comment. Thank you. And apparently Mary Scott, I didn't even know you were out there when I said all those great things about you and your research. So we're delighted that you're here with us today. If anyone has any questions for our final few minutes, please submit them. But LaToya, I always want to ask you this, and it's kind of my favorite question to ask anybody. How do you stay up on the trends, right? Particularly as a marketer, what do you read? What do you listen to? What experts do you look to? I really love to know what's kind of in your inbox in the morning and on your podcast list.
Ooh, podcast list. I listened to how I built how I built this. It is fascinating to hear the stories of some of the companies that we know and love in the US. And what I love is how much time is spent on the failures. Because that's the bit that I'm, I work at Cappfinity every day. And so we're constantly telling people like to focus on your strengths. And that's true. But a lot of times, what's also nice is that you learn along the way of what didn't work. And then you can apply those learnings in what you do next. So that's a podcast that I listen to really often. I also, believe it or not, I spend a fair amount of time sitting in Reddit groups with where Gen Z is sharing really, really candid feelings about their prospects in terms of work and what to do next. I typically bring specific data points from Reddit groups that I've heard and seen back to our team often, because it's good for us to build on and listen to what we're hearing from our clients, but it's also really good to constantly try to hear what Gen Z, or millennial candidates are saying. So those are two things that I do pretty often. And of course, I do a fair amount of reading.
A lot of chatter going on about Reddit. LaToya, that's so brilliant, because a marketing tenet, right, is go where the people are, right? And the Gen Zs are on Reddit. Could you share anything that you've learned from Reddit, or even just kind of an overall general insight?
What is heartening for me is that what we found in the research. So we did the research with YouGov at a moment of time, but some of the messages that I keep seeing in these groups is that younger candidates want to show their work. Remember, you say, as we were learning division and show your work, that was something you used to hear in school all the time. And that's one of the things that I'm hearing in many of these groups is like, give us a chance to actually show what we could do. And to be transparent, if I'm not moving forward in the process, don't, spend multiple times trying to get me to interview and then stop talking to me all of a sudden and wonder when, like, you have another role, why I don't respond. Those are not my words. Those are, if I could tell you verbatim, those are things that I read and I was like, ouch, okay. How do I take and make meaning out of this and really try to look at what we're doing and make sure we don't do that. So that transparency bit seems to be really, really important, and communicating is important too. So, and those are things that we can build on, we can learn that, and so I think it's just sort of where we are right now.
I love that. I think Gen Z, even more than millennials, in my experience, are willing to tell you everything that's on their minds. When people say to me, Lindsay, how do I find out what Gen Z is thinking? I sort of say, just ask, because there's plenty of willingness to share that. And we've got some really positive comments here in the chat for you, LaToya. Our good friend, Brian Quick, hi, Brian, says he loved your comment that your job is to enable what Gen Zs are passionate about. And Trudy Steinfeld agrees. I think we're all looking for passion and work, and it's wonderful when we can enable people to feel confident enough to pursue this in relation to work. I love that you get this always. So really appreciative, Brian and Trudy. Also, Mary Scott, who is our research expert, agrees 100% Reddit can be a gold mine of what students really think. So thank you for that. LaToya, it's our tradition that I sum up what our guest has shared in 3 takeaways. So thank you to our friend and colleague, LaToya Hodge, our chief optimist and head of marketing and partnerships at Cappfinity, also a recovering Gen Xer. 3 takeaways from LaToya Hodge here on our episode of Future Strong. Number 1, she shared some insights from Cappfinity's recent candidate-driven job market report published with YouGov. 80% of Gen Zs say they want to understand a company's culture before accepting an offer. So LaToya's advice, show them a day in the life. Really be authentic about your culture and put that out there. It is so desired and appreciated by Gen Z. It seems obvious, but a lot of companies are not doing that. Number 2, students really want to understand the true requirements of a job and the behaviors that you're looking for. GPA is not always a way to see that. And you really opened my eyes. I have never once in my 20-year public speaking career been asked what my GPA is. And somehow I have made it through without sharing that number. So remember that GPA is not always going to be your best marker of what is going to make somebody successful in a job. And finally, so much energy around LaToya's suggestion to look at Reddit and other places where Gen Zs are hanging out and talking in an unfiltered way. LaToya's job at Cappfinity and the job of so many of us who care about recruiting and early careers is to enable what Gen Zs are passionate about. So provide tools and opportunities for them to show that passion. And LaToya, I know you are so passionate about the work that you do, which is why it's always such a joy to work with you. Thank you for stepping in for our friend Nikki Garcia. We look forward to welcoming her back in 2 weeks when we will be featuring in our next episode Stephanie Palante from the University Recruiting and Relations Group at Cigna. She is also president-elect of NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers. That is going to be here in 2 weeks on July 15th. LaToya, I will leave you with the last word. Thank you so much for being our guest. Would you like to close us out?
Oh man, this time really does go by so fast. I really appreciate this opportunity to kind of share some of the insights from the report. The other thing I would say is let's everybody hang in there. Let's, keep working on what we can work on and call on your friends, call on your partners, call on us here at Cappfinity. And we can all, work together and kind of keep moving forward. So thanks for the opportunity and have a good long weekend, everyone.
Thanks everyone for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.